So let's talk about something fascinating. We're going to dive into what happens when one of the newest, most powerful forces in our world, artificial intelligence, collides with one of the oldest and most personal, religion. We're going to see how this new digital faith is being shaped by forces that we can't even see.
That sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, right? But for millions of us, it's already happening. We're getting more of our spiritual and religious content online than ever before, and all of it is being served up to us by algorithms. But here's the big question. What happens when those algorithms have their own hidden beliefs?
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the new town square for faith, which, is social media. Then, we're going to peel back the curtain and dig deeper to find the biases that are literally baked into the code itself. And we'll wrap up by exploring a totally fascinating and kind of radical new solution. I mean, what happens when you actually teach an AI to follow a constitution?
So how in the world did we get here? Well, the first piece of this puzzle is just getting our heads around the massive shift in how people, especially the younger crowd, are connecting with their faith. It's not just happening in churches, temples, or mosques anymore. Think about it. Platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and especially TikTok have become these huge hubs for religious life. This digital-first approach can make faith feel way more accessible, and it can build these really powerful virtual communities. But, and this is a big but, for every single benefit, there's a hidden danger lurking. And that brings us to the two faces of digital faith. Because on one hand, this technology offers these incredible, amazing opportunities. But on the other hand, it opens the door to some pretty significant new dangers. The upside? Oh, it's totally clear. Religious leaders can reach way more people. You get these supportive online communities, and knowledge isn't locked away anymore. But the downside is just as powerful. These exact same platforms can become breeding grounds for misinformation, creating these polarizing echo chambers and pushing the most extreme interpretations of faith right to the top of your feed. And for a long time, we kind of just thought, oh, it's a content problem. It's just about what users post. But a groundbreaking new research paper is telling us that the problem goes much, much deeper than just the stuff we see. It's not about the content. It's about the code that we don't see.
And this really gets us to the absolute core of what we're talking about today. What if the bias isn't just coming from us, the users? What if the very AI models that power these platforms have learned our absolute worst societal prejudices?
Okay, so there's a technical term for this. It's called representational bias. The easiest way to think about it is this. The AIs we're talking about, large language models, are like giant pattern-finding machines. They've been trained on a huge chunk of the internet. And in all that data, they learn to connect words and ideas. The problem is, they also learn our worst habits, including some really harmful stereotypes about religion, race, and, in the specific context of this research, the Indian caste system.
Now, check this out. This is how the researchers made this invisible bias totally visible. It's brilliant. They gave an AI a sentence with a blank space for an identity and a keyword. When the keyword was discriminated, the AI filled in the blank with Dalit. But when they just changed that one keyword to privileged, the AI completed the sentence with Brahmin. So here's the kicker. The AI isn't thinking. It's just spitting back the powerful, deeply ingrained stereotypes it learned from all the data we fed it.
So how on earth do you fix a problem that's this deep? Well, you don't just tweak a few lines of code. You have to give it a whole new set of rules to live by. You give it a constitution.
The researchers behind this work took their inspiration from Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. He was the main architect of the Indian Constitution, and he argued that we have to treat equality as a core governing principle, even if it's not a perfect reality. So they thought, okay, let's apply that exact same philosophy to an AI. And so they created this framework called Ambedkar. The whole goal is to guide these AI language models so that the text they generate actually aligns with the principles of equality and non-discrimination that are found in the Indian Constitution, specifically Articles 14 through 17. So how does this actually work? It's a really clever 5-step dance that happens in a fraction of a second. First, the system kind of pokes the AI with a prompt just to see what kind of bias might pop out. Then it has the AI come up with a bunch of different ways to complete that thought. Now, this next part is absolutely crucial. It creates an opposite version of the prompt to test for prejudice. Then it measures the difference in the AI's answers to those two opposing prompts. And finally, it looks at all the options on the table and picks the one that is the most neutral and the most fair.
To make this whole thing super clear, think of it like a courtroom. It's a brilliant analogy. You have a smaller, faster AI that acts as a witness. It proposes what to say. But hey,
this witness might be biased. So a larger, wiser AI, one that's been trained on constitutional principles, acts as a constitutional tribunal. It actually reviews the witness's statement for fairness before it gets approved as the final output. Pretty cool, right?
This whole approach is what the researchers call fairness by speculation. So the big question is, did it work? What's the final verdict?
The results are, well, they're really impressive. The framework managed to achieve a mean absolute reduction in religious bias of over 26%. That's a huge deal.
And you can see that drop so clearly right here. Across a whole range of tests that were measuring for religious and caste-based bias, the Ambedkar framework consistently, and I mean significantly, lowered the AI's tendency to produce stereotypical and biased content.
But here's the part that makes this a potential game changer. It achieves all of this bias reduction without some massive, expensive computational cost. The entire process adds only about a 6% delay. That's a tiny price to pay for a much, much fairer AI. This makes it a practical solution, not just some cool idea in a lab. Now, of course, no solution is perfect. The big strengths here are that it works in real time without needing costly retraining. You can apply it to a bunch of different AIs, and it's actually grounded in real legal principles. But the researchers are also super clear about its limitations. Right now, it's tailored specifically to India. It's also only as good as its verifier AI, and it's much better at catching obviously biased words than it is at fixing more subtle problems in the tone of a whole conversation. And all of this brings us to one final huge thought. The Ambedkar framework proves a powerful new idea that we can actually proactively embed our highest societal values directly into our technology. We don't have to just play defense against bad outputs. It proves we can teach an AI a constitution, which leaves us with a pretty provocative question for the future. If we can do that, what else should we be teaching them?